Hello and welcome to our podcast. I'm Dani, and today Crate.com talks with Pippa Rogers, the Global Director of Marketing and Communications at World Animal Protection. If you haven't heard of them yet, their mission is to end animal cruelty and suffering. If you're new here to this podcast, remember to press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app. Hi, Pippa, and welcome.
Hi there, really nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
It's a pleasure. Nice to meet you too. I'm really looking forward to learn more about you guys. So let's talk first about the origin of World Animal Protection. What inspired the creation of the organization and how has your work evolved since its inception?
Well, World Animal Protection has actually been around for over 70 years. And actually, we were started as an organisation helping animals in disasters. And it was two organisations that merged together when there were some major disasters. And of course, what they had noticed as well, there was a great humanitarian effort to help people. Animals in disasters were often overlooked, but of course suffered equally. And so two organisations formed to set up what was formerly known as Whisper. And in the last 10 years, we rebranded to World Animal Protection. So over the years, we've helped everything from animals in disasters to animals, community animals in the street dogs, for example. But more recently, we have changed our focus to be much more of a campaigning organisation and to focus on two major areas which we see to be the biggest causes of animal cruelty and suffering in the world. And that is the global food system, which of course comprises factory farming, which literally sees billions of animals really treated like cogs in a machine, actually, like pure commodities, and suffering abhorrent cruelty without any knowledge or without any care really to their suffering and their anguish. So we do a big focus on the global food system and ending factory farming. And our other big focus is on ending the global trade and exploitation in wild animals.
Wow, thank you for this. I think, yeah, actually, you've been in this journey like for so long and you see the different phases of it. So it's great to know how it began and the fact that you were able to understand new trends, right? Because the world shifted completely from back then. And we see now some other issues are like pressing, especially in this case of wildlife, as I mentioned, and food factoring. And I would really like to know more about this. Let's begin with wildlife. You know, it's like, I think it's paramount right now. We've been discussing it, especially with some endangered species. It's crazy. We see a lot of talk about poaching in Africa and all of that. So how does World Animal Protection is addressing these challenges now? What initiatives do you have in place?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting about wild animals. And I think the debate, and like, because you said trends have shifted, and actually the debate in wild animals has very much been on endangered species and wild animals, being at risk of becoming extinct. And what to some extent has been overlooked is the cruelty of wild animals that actually are alive day to day in these cruel systems. So we focus really on a few key areas within the broader world, because of course the wildlife trade is just mega. I mean, I think it's the third biggest trade in the world. If you count the numbers, it's trillions of wild animals suffering, and you can't even begin to contemplate that. So what we do is we really break it down into, again, the areas where they suffer the most. So one area is wild animals in tourism. And that would be everything from elephant rides, for example, to dolphin shows, to a new trend is to taking photos with tigers, to walking with lions. And actually, it's kind of ironic because the people that do this aren't cruel. They actually do that because they want to have an experience with a wild animal. They actually love wild animals. So a large part of our work is really raising awareness of the cruelty behind the scenes that happens for wild animals to be exploited. So, for example, we launched an undercover investigation into some really harrowing treatment of elephants, which is called the crush. So, for an elephant, for you to be able to ride an elephant, every elephant has to go through this thing called the crush, which really is they're taken away from their mums as babies. They're beaten. They're beaten with a bull hook. They have their soul and their spirit crushed so that they become submissive enough for then people to ride them on holiday. And a lot of people don't know that this happens behind the scenes. Likewise, dolphins in the oceans, they swim like literally thousands of miles. They dive to great depths. And dolphins that are in dolphin shows or in dolphinariums, I mean, literally, they're kind of in a prison cell. They're just going round and round in circles in a chlorinated pool that, again, causes them psychological damage. It makes them ill. It makes them stressed. They're forced to perform for crowds of people cheering at them. So a large part of our work with wild animals is to raise awareness of that suffering behind the scenes and to actually put pressure on travel companies and tour operators to stop selling wild animal experiences. And to galvanize people actually, and to get people power behind that, and to say, do not book your holiday with a tour operator that funds these experiences. And, you know, we've had some great success. We managed to move Expedia and stop them selling travel shows. We also did a lot of work with Instagram a couple of years ago, who are kind of promoting a lot of these experiences. But we need to do more. There's still a lot of other travel operators out there. So we've, for example, we have a campaign against TUI at the moment to get them to stop selling tickets to dolphin shows. Or to, you know, experiences with dolphins. So wild animals in tourism is an important part of our work. But then on the other extreme, there's also animals that are used in traditional medicine still. And so wild animals are their parts, but even live wild animals are used to fuel traditional medicine. And I think one of the probably the worst examples of that is the bear bile trade. And bears are literally kept in cages their entire life and have their bile extracted on a regular basis to go into traditional medicine. And in terms of, I think, the duration and the severity of suffering, it's hard to think of a worse example, because they live long. Well, a lot of them actually do die, but the ones that survived live long lives in these cages, sometimes in darkened rooms. And imagine having their bile extracted, without anaesthetic, without any pain relief. So again, we're raising awareness of that. But actually, another large part of our work is raising experience of wildlife-friendly alternatives, because a lot of the medicines that are used, or the animal products that are used in traditional medicine, there are actually alternatives that are plant-based alternatives. We don't need to do that anymore. So in some countries, we work with doctors, local practitioners, pharmaceuticals, to really raise awareness of that and try and change that so that animals are no longer needed. So that's a couple of examples. Happy to give more, but I think that should give you a flavour of some of our work in wildlife.
It did, and it actually got me super curious to know more. I'm gonna dive into your webpage. We're gonna share the details with everybody listening later. But wow, it's really a different perspective, I think, because I've heard and actually talked to some people about this tourism with wild animals, right? I think we don't talk about it enough. That's one perspective, but then once you go there, I think we don't really think about what goes behind the scenes. So it's great that you bring this to us. But then when you talk about traditional medicine, this is something honestly new to me, and it's really, really interesting to see. And it must be a quite a struggle, I would say, because it's so culturally intricate in some societies. So it must be quite a fight. So yeah, you just got me super curious about it.
Well, I mean, the great thing about World Animal Protection is actually we have presence in 14 countries around the world. So we actually do have a presence in places like China and Thailand. We work across South Africa. So actually we do work on a local level. And that's why, for example, on the traditional medicine, a big part of our work is to promote wildlife-friendly alternatives, because we do know it is a part of traditional culture, and we do know that it's very important. And so we work with people to kind of try and establish alternatives, and ones that, you know, obviously raising awareness, but also looking at solutions. And we're a very solutions-focused organization. So while we might call out the problem, we will also look and you know, help you know, local partners or governments or institutions to really look for solutions as well.
Wow, that's amazing. Honestly, my mind is racing right now to think about this. But now let's move to the other point that you mentioned before, that is factory farming, right? Because that's a significant concern. I think right now we all know that it is a concern. But how does this World Animal Protection has been working to improve these conditions? You know, what are the campaigns, and what is your take on it?
Yeah, so yeah, factory farming is a biggie. I mean, obviously there's lots of conversations now about the global food system and, you know, the links to climate, to human health, and animal welfare is absolutely at the heart of those discussions. And in fact, we've just been at COP28 and talking about the emissions from factory farms and the impact that has on the climate emergency. So there's a huge interlink. But what we would say is that, you know, the food system is broken. Factory farming is literally the biggest cause of animal cruelty on the planet. If you think about the billions of animals that are, you know, crammed into cages just to produce meat for people, I do think it's one of those things that future generations will look back on in horror. You know, especially like pigs, there's a lot of country where pigs are in these sow stalls. They're just in them, you know, for months on end. They can't move, they can't turn around, they can't interact with their young. And that, you know, pigs are actually very intelligent beings. They're as sentient as a dog or a small child. We've got some evidence to show that, you know, they can play puzzles, you know, they can interact with each other, they can actually show empathy. So pigs are, I mean, to do this to pigs is pretty abhorrent. And there is a narrative we find that you need factory farming to feed the planet, and we would totally counter that and actually say you do not. So what do we think needs to be done? Well, in the past, we've worked to work with different companies to improve the animal welfare standards, you know, that the animals in their supply chain are enduring. But actually, that's why, you know, based again on trends, that's why we've shifted our approach a bit to now tackle the whole system. Because even if you give an animal a bit more space, it's still not a good life for an animal. What we want to do is that less animals suffer and more animals, you know, that are used for food do have a good life. So what we are advocating for is a ban on any new factory farms. We don't think there should be any more factory farms built in the world. Because obviously for an animal welfare perspective, but like I've also said, the emissions and pollution that come out of factory farming is also staggering. And the amount of soy, for example, that's being depleted in the Amazon to feed animals is just, you know, destroying pristine forests. And what a lot of people don't know as well is that because of the poor conditions of animals in factory farms, they are given antibiotics routinely to stave off any diseases, to stop them getting disease. But that is now coming through into rivers, and we're seeing an increase in antibiotic resistance in people. And I think the World Health Organization has said by 2050 that will be a major. I think that we're saying it's a bigger risk than cancer, because if we all become resistant to antibiotics, that's a major health crisis. So we do need to stop pumping animals full of antibiotics. So we're advocating a plant-based diet, so much more, so people eating less meat and eating higher welfare meat. So we're not a vegan organization, we understand that people do, need and want to eat protein, but we're saying eat less. And when you do eat it, try and source it from, a high welfare place, or where the animals have been treated well. And we're saying that, and then what we're trying to do as well is encourage more kind of sustainable, smaller kind of farming practices, and the removal ultimately of factory farms.
Thank you for this. I think this whole antibiotic things is something that we should talk more about, like in other arenas. I think, again, new information to myself, but probably something that people just are not aware about, which is insane, right? Especially after COVID, it's like we need to be more aware of the whole connections, ecosystems and all of that. So please. And then actually it's interesting to understand that you do not position yourselves as a vegan organization, because sometimes I think it's a way to approach it, but that leave behind the whole concept of, okay, some people are just not going to do it. So what we do on that point, we're not going to be able to help them out. What's going to happen? So to think it in that way, it's really interesting.
Yeah, and we want to support, also just to say on that point, that we want to support like everyone in their journey. And we know that not everyone is either able or willing to do that, but it doesn't mean you can't be an animal lover. It doesn't mean you're not an animal lover. It's the steps that everyone can take that will help improve animal welfare and animal protection.
Pippa, I really want to ask you something now, because you mentioned about pigs are sentient, right? Could you explain a little bit more about this whole concept of animal sentience? Because I something, again, we're not talking about enough, and it's a different take on it. What does it involve exactly?
Yeah, so animal sentience is a big focus for us this year. And really what it is about showing and demonstrating that animals are living, breathing beings just like us, and that they can feel emotions, so they can feel joy, they can feel pain, they can suffer. And it's really raising awareness of that to more people. And the great thing is that now more research there's more and more research into animal sentience that's really demonstrating this. So I don't know if you've seen it, but we've just launched a campaign called The Thoughtful Pig, and it's based exactly on that. And what we do is that we have a pig, we created it all out of CGI, so to make sure it was as compelling as possible, but also so that no animals would be harmed in it. And it really poses that question from the pig: do you think that I'm thinking? And if I am thinking, is this okay to treat me like this? And what we're doing is actually using sentience to really pose that question to people. Because I think most people deep down do get a sense that, animals do have emotions. Like for anyone who's got a dog or a cat, they would know. Like I've got a Labrador, and I look at my dog and I can see the expressions in his face, the emotions in his eyes. And what we're trying to do is waken that up for more people. While there is acknowledgement that there's some animals like cats or dogs that do have feelings, that's totally forgotten about when it comes to farmed animals. But actually, the research shows, like I said, pigs can solve puzzles, cows have best friends, chickens like to play. So our CEO used to kind of work in a place where they rescued farmed animals, and he's got great stories about the chickens being very playful with him, and the pigs actually. Elephants grieve, they dream. Dolphins can actually recognize themselves in a mirror. So there's more and more research coming out just showing, and I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think, in future generations, they'll have much more understanding of animals and of their feelings and their emotions. And we think this is really important because if you do think that animals can feel, then it does make you question how we're treating them. And at the moment, we just treat animals like commodities. We just treat them like another item in a factory that are ours to exploit, to do what we want with. And what we're trying to show is that if animals are sentient, if they can think and feel, should we be treating them like that? And I think actually most people would say, no, we shouldn't. And we need to look after them, and we need to respect them and their well-being and their rights as well.
Well, I think that's an amazing perspective, honestly. And it's great that there's more research going about this, because I think it's a life-changing perspective, I would say. You cannot go untouched by this when you think about it, and it makes total sense. And I love this AI initiative. I think it's really, really, really amazing. And wow, my head is racing right now. My brain is racing because you gave me so much interesting information, and I wanna dive deep into these topics. I think it's great. And people, for everybody listening to us right now that got either curious as I got, or really want to get engaged, what are the best ways to help you guys keep going?
Well, definitely take a look at our website at worldanimalprotection.org, because we are present in, like I said, 14 countries around the world. So do see what we're doing on a local level as well as a global level. So we would definitely like you to take a look, because we are running campaigns at the moment. We're campaigning against JBS, which is the biggest meat producer, which supplies meat to supermarkets and to shops in many, many countries around the world. So we'd love you to get behind that campaign. We're campaigning against travel giants like TUI. So again, we'd love you to support those campaigns. Of course, if you can donate, that would be amazing. But most important of all is really for you to become an advocate for animals. So if you are on holiday, if you see an experience where a wild animal, for example, where you can touch it, sit on it, stroke it, or have a photo with it, that unfortunately means that animal has endured cruelty. So stay away from places where they really have wild animal experiences, and choose wildlife friendly or animal friendly alternatives. Likewise, please try and eat less meat and eat good high welfare meat where the animals have been treated with respect. Go for more plant-based products. There's lots of things you can do. And importantly, if you could become an advocate for animal welfare with your networks, with your communities, and could really raise awareness of some of the things that I've been saying today, talk to your friends about animal sentience, and really pose that question about how we treat animals. What we ultimately want to do is change that narrative that animals are ours to exploit. And we want that to be seen as actually a stigma, that we no longer treat animals that way, and that we create a world where animals are treated with respect and kindness.
But thank you so much for all of this. Thank you for joining. It was really great conversation today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a really, really great discussing this all with you. And yeah, I really hope that it gets people thinking about animals in a different context.
Absolutely, me too. And I was super glad. Really, it was my pleasure to have you. And for those listening also, thank you so much for staying with us for one more episode. And remember, if you enjoyed it, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because that shows the algorithms that this is an important conversation and more people can learn about the importance of the world animal protection. Go to their webpage, get involved if you can, and I see you in the next episode. Bye.